So good morning and welcome to this meeting, emergency meeting of the Civilian Complaint Review Board. My name is Fred Davey and I am the chair of the board. I'm going to ask my board members, my fellow board members, to introduce themselves as they speak this morning, since we have a little bit of a different setup here this morning. And people are both on the phone and on video. So as they make comments, and I would encourage my fellow board members to make comments, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. I'm very heartened this morning that so many of you have invested in the issue of civilian oversight of the NYPD. Your presence this morning is proof of how much accountability means to everyday New Yorkers. We call this meeting because transparency is a fundamental tenet here at the CCRB, and we need to be transparent with all of you about the challenges the CCRB faces. Chief among those challenges was the refusal of members of the NYPD and their union attorneys to participate in remote CCRB interviews. As all of you know, these interviews, which typically take place in person at the CCRB office, are an important component of a CCRB investigation. With our office, like most city offices, closed due to COVID-19, the CCRB has shifted to remote work. We did this because we understood how serious this pandemic is, and we prioritized the safety of our city. For some, this has been personal. Many of us, including some of our staff, some of our board members, and many members of the NYPD, officers of the NYPD, became sick. We understood that the virus would be serious. We understood that many members of the NYPD would need time to recover. And we gave them that time. And together, our city has flattened the curve. In the meantime, the CCRB with the NYPD developed a virtual interview system with one goal in mind: ensuring the health and safety of all our personnel while maintaining the integrity of this disciplinary process. By the end of May, we were prepared to launch a new virtual process. But then our city, as our nation, faced another test as the death of George Floyd sparked protests in support of Black lives. Hundreds of complaints of police misconduct came into our office, and in the weeks that followed, the CCRB attempted to start the remote process, the remote interview process that the CCRB had developed with the NYPD. Members of service, with the guidance of their counsel, simply refused to participate in this remote interview process, the very remote interview process the CCRB had developed with the NYPD. Since April, the CCRB, the agency that New Yorkers expect to work to hold the NYPD accountable, despite having received hundreds of complaints, despite having negotiated with the NYPD, despite having worked in good faith with the police unions, has conducted fewer than 25 officer interviews since April. This is bigger than the CCRB or the NYPD. This is about the fact that New Yorkers have put renewed faith in this civilian oversight process. New Yorkers are demanding change. They are demanding accountability. And this system owes them the impartial, fact-based investigations our agency is mandated to pursue. The city charter requires the NYPD to cooperate with the CCRB. The NYPD patrol guide requires the NYPD to cooperate with the CCRB. The patrol guide also states that a member of the NYPD who fails to cooperate should be suspended from the NYPD without pay. And so just yesterday, after the CCRB published public notice of this meeting to hold officers and the NYPD accountable because more than 75 members of the NYPD have refused to sit down for a CCRB interview. The NYPD then ordered members of service, ordered the officers to cooperate with our investigations under the penalty of suspension. This is a welcome move. This is as it should be, and this is what the law requires. Following a brief presentation from our investigative staff, the board will discuss this issue. We will also open it up for public comment. I'd like now to turn it over to our investigative staff to discuss current backlog, the plan for remote interviews going forward, and the impact this backlog has had on our investigations. Again, I want to thank all of you for joining this meeting this morning, and now I'll turn it to our investigative staff.
Thank you, Chair Davey. Hi, everyone. My name is Dane Buchanan. I am the Deputy Chief of Investigations, and I have a short presentation for you to explain the current state of the CCRB officer interviews. In the course of a full investigation, officer interviews are absolutely integral. Simply put, if we can't interview officers, then we can't close full investigations. Expedited processing times are beneficial for all parties. Both complainants and victims and officers have an interest in justice and expedited processing of these complaints. For civilians, it's to find out whether or not their rights have been violated. For officers to have a fair investigation and not have open complaints looming over their heads. The NYPD and the CCRB both share an interest in resolving these complaints expeditiously, to know what is going on with their officers in these complaints and to identify any patterns. Additionally, for the public at large, it's an issue of safety. They want to know what is happening with these complaints. They want them resolved quickly to see that steps are being taken in the case of misconduct and to hopefully build trust in the officers. In 2019, there was an average of 14 interviews of officers per day, with a maximum in one day of 39 officers being interviewed. As we move into 2020, because of the COVID crisis and other things, we have been unable to proceed with those pace of officer interviews. This has left more than 900 officers needing to be interviewed. At the average of 14 per day of 2019, it would take the CCRB 12 weeks to get through these officers. Additionally, this does not include the number of involved officers that are a part of investigations that are in their earlier stages, or cases where officers are still unidentified, and of course, complaints to come. Remote officer interviews are very important to reduce the chance of COVID spread, not only to the civilians who come to our offices, but also to the officers, their representatives, and our staff. More people in one place increases the risk of the COVID spread, especially since the CCRB has only one location for the entire city and one waiting room for all officers and their representatives. That puts a lot of people who would never otherwise interact with each other into one area to further increase the spread of COVID. Additionally, there are few interview rooms at the CCRB that can accommodate 4 socially distanced persons for a protracted conversation. Additionally, it's important to produce quality investigations. As previously mentioned, the timeliness of investigations is important for all parties. Additionally, remote interviews give that face-to-face interaction, mimicking the pre-COVID in-person interview, which is important for investigations. Remote interviews have been successful. In June, we did a fully remote interview of a lieutenant, with the lieutenant and their representatives at their office and with the 2 investigators at their homes. It was conducted without incident, and audio and video was recorded using MS Teams. However, recording video interviews is not preferred, as we do not need the video, and we do not have the storage capacity for those videos, and the deletion of video recordings may have legal consequences. In July, there was another remote interview conducted with one investigator at home and another in the office with the officer and their representative. During that interview, only audio was recorded, and we did so via two methods for redundancy: a multi-directional speakerphone and boundary mic in the conference room, as well as the remote investigator using Next Phone hardware. Both sources captured quality audio recordings. This method was beneficial because it allowed for audio recording only, and the investigator being in the room is not a necessary feature of that model, and both investigators could be remote. We want safe, effective, and efficient officer interviews. When possible, officers at locations other than the CCRB. We want to conduct them using MS Teams to have that in-person, mimic that in-person interaction with face-to-face interviews, and record audio only. As I previously mentioned, there are at least two, if not more, solutions to do so over MS Teams. Thank you for your time, and now I'll direct you back to Chair D.
Thank you, Dane. And so now we're going to move to public comment. I'm going to ask Yahara. I'm going to ask Yahara Alvarez if she will go to the first person on our list and take us on our list. That will be followed by a discussion with board members. So Yahara, will you call on our first speaker? I should also ask people who want to speak to use the raise your hand function in your chat function. So Yahara.
Thank you, Chair Davey. First, we'll be hearing from Assemblymember Catalina Cruz. Soren, if you can unmute her and enable video if possible.
Good morning.
Can you see me?
Yes, Councilman.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me today. I can't never tell with these computer systems. I will keep it short because I know there's a lot of other folks who are getting ready to provide for having me today. My name is Catalina Cruz, and I am the Assembly member representing Jackson Heights, Corona, and Elmhurst. I am here in light of the state legislature's recent passing of we're actually doing away with 58, and to highlight what has been truly a systematic failure. I think for years the board, which was created to basically instill accountability and credibility and to encourage police community relationships, has had its hands tied bureaucratically from being able to be effective in the best way possible. And I'm here to affirmatively say and unequivocally say that that time is over. Police oversight is required when it's evident that they're incapable of policing themselves. And the most recent example is that I'd probably say the majority of the officers who should have been produced were not produced. And it wasn't, as you mentioned, Chair, that until yesterday, when it was clear that this meeting was going to take place, that these officers were actually began to be produced, but only a few. When you have hundreds and hundreds of complaints that need your attention, you can't be chasing after one or two officers or after the union to do the job that the law requires them to do. Because if you look at the patrol guide, if you look at the law, they are required to comply. And when they don't, because this isn't an invitation, when they don't, there are consequences. When I went to advocates and asked for assistance in preparing today and in figuring out what we were going to be saying, the response was that many of their members, many of their clients, because I spoke to a few lawyers as well, have such little faith that there would be any kind of consequence or accountability that even if the CCRB were to find wrongdoing, they don't even bother reporting a lot of these abuses. And the fact that the unions are standing in between your ability to do your job, it just blows my mind, because ultimately, if the officer is found to have had no wrongdoing, it actually benefits the officer to have these issues resolved fairly quickly. We must start to reinstill the community's faith, not only in police, but in the ability of the board to do its job. And that's what we as the state legislature have been trying to do, especially when we dealt with 58 earlier this year. This coupled with the proactive versus punitive community policing and investments into programs, that I see one of our council members actually joined, that I think it's the job that we get to do, to invest in the community. But your board was created for a specific reason. And if we're giving you the tools, but the unions continue to stand in front of that, we need the mayor to step in. We need the commissioner to do his job and make sure that the police is complying with what is clear in the patrol guide, in the law. Produce the officers, ensure that they are providing you with the information you need. And so that is all I will say, but I will remind unions that we at the state legislature are watching very close, because we're not going to allow that you continue to circumvent the law. You continue to circumvent policy and the requirements that you have. We want to make sure that we can instill trust again in the community. And if we continue to act and make excuses, because in the era of WebEx, there's no reason why you shouldn't produce an officer for an interview, then we're going to be taking action. I thank you for your time today, and I think the advocates have been fighting for this much longer than those of us who've been in elected office.
Thank you, Assemblymember. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate your leadership as well. And I think I may have misspoken and called you a council member earlier, so I apologize for that. But we really,
maybe, who knows?
Who knows, exactly. But thank you for your leadership and for standing with the agency as we attempt to fulfill the mandate that both the law and the people of the city of New York have given us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
You too. So Yahira, our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember. Next, we'll have Councilmember Rory Lansman.
Thank you. Good morning. Can I just make sure that folks can hear me?
Good morning. We can, yes.
Good. Terrific. So I'm Rory Lansman, and I chair excuse me, the City Council's Committee on the Justice System. And I just wanted to pop into this meeting to commend the CCRB for standing up for the rule of law. There is an emergency in New York City related to police and policing brought on by the NYPD leadership and the police unions. I've been quoted as saying that I've never seen a commissioner or any head of any agency be so outwardly insubordinate and disdainful of the rule of law, the city council, and the democratically elected mayor, who is their boss. I have to add to that list, disdainful of the CCRB. More than ever, NYPD leadership and police unions are implicitly and explicitly telling officers that they are above the law, and refusal to appear for CCRB interviews is another deliberate effort to suppress reforms and skirt accountability. Police officers have no right to refuse to participate in the justice system. And in fact, the CCRB is not asking for anything that many other organizations in the justice system are seeking and engaged in. Virtual hearings are being conducted at almost every level of the justice system. Arraignments in the city's criminal courts have gone on virtually throughout the pandemic. Oath is conducting proceedings online. The city council meets virtually. Even the Supreme Court of the United States began hearing arguments via teleconference. The fact is, the CCRB is facing a backlog of, as I understand it, at least 500 interviews from before the pandemic. More than 1,500 new complaints were filed from April through July amid widespread police violence, first with social distancing enforcement, followed by the department's response to peaceful protests after the murder of George Floyd. Is it a coincidence that the refusal to participate in virtual hearings coincides with 4 straight months of overt police misconduct, including unprovoked clubbings, pepper sprayings, vehicular assaults, and that's just the stuff that we saw on camera. So I want to thank the board and its staff for staying true to your mission, for sticking up for the rule of law, and just to let you know that I'm ready to assist you in any way that I can in that endeavor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Langston. We really appreciate that, and again, appreciate your continued and persistent leadership in this area. So thank you so much. I'm going to see now if any of our board members have any comments before we move on with further public comment. Any members of the board wish to comment? If so, just unmute yourselves.
Fred, it's John Siegel.
Hi, John.
You hear me?
Yes. Morning.
I want to add 2 quick points to what we've heard so far as a prelude to the rest of the public comments. The first is, as Councilman Langston said, there's nothing, and we've emphasized all along, there's nothing at this point unusual or even innovative about the proposal for officer interviews that the CCRB developed, agreed to, and then had to continue to negotiate over and over again. And frankly, I think this is something that is going to need to continue post-pandemic. There's no reason for police officers to spend a full shift or a half a shift at full pay to travel to 100 Church Street to give a half hour or an hour interview when they can do it remotely by video from a station house and be on active duty the rest of their shift. And these are the sorts of pandemic innovations that are going to have to be implemented. But the 2 points I wanted to make were, one, I wanted to commend our executive director, John Dorsch, who has been the point person in negotiating with all the stakeholders in this complex process of civilian oversight, but in a system where the police commissioner maintains command, discipline, and final disciplinary authority. And the system relies on the good faith adherence to the rule of law and legal process by all the participants, which, as the councilman indicated, and I think quite clearly, was a breakdown in the rule of law in this process over the last several months. And Executive Director Dorsch, whose negotiations I was monitoring, did a fantastic, persistent, and patient job of negotiating with all the stakeholders, maintaining professional relationships with them, while he did, frankly, triple backward twisting somersaults to try to get this worked out with counterparties who in the end did not appear to be agreeable. And I just want to commend his effort, his very judicious temperament in carrying out those negotiations that have reached a point where hopefully now this is all going to go forward. The second point I want to make is this: let there be no mistake about how we got to this point. And in the continuing discussion and litigation over how the repeal of Section 50A is going to be implemented, this situation over the last several months is the absolute best evidence that this system can only work and can only instill public trust if it is completely public and transparent. And the efforts to cloak CCRB determinations, final agency determinations by this independent agency in continued secrecy, even though the state legislature repealed 50A, will be a continuing element of what we've seen in the last couple of months of an attempt to erode the rule of law here. And this situation, which was only resolved through public notice, public inquiry, media inquiry, and transparency on the decision makers of city leadership, is the norm that has to be maintained in this system to have public trust and a functioning rule of law in this system. And so going forward, as the board, as the CCRB has, it's critical that efforts to roll back that transparency in court and otherwise require the support, the opposition to those efforts by the Corporation Council, by the mayor, and by all leadership of the city of New York. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. I want to echo your compliments to our executive director and his team. I think Matt Kadushin also joined John in those negotiations. Jericho Richardson has played a key role in the agency's ongoing functioning in this very tough time. So I want to thank John and the team for the hard work and echo your compliments of him in these negotiations. I also want to offer my support for your comments about the need of the support of all the leadership of the city to make this open and transparent and accountable process work. Because otherwise, as you said, the people of New York City are deprived of what the law requires. So thank you. And thank you for your leadership on this as well. Any other board members wish to make comments before we go back to public comment?
Esmeralda Simmons. I simply wanted to thank the staff and you as well, Chair, for persistently pursuing the ability for this board and this agency to fulfill our mandate. I was actually quite surprised that anyone at this point in time would object to remote interviews. Everything is being done on Zoom or on WebEx. So I don't see why this agency's procedures should be anything different. But I am not fazed, and I do not believe that this was really about that issue at all. I think it was simply a temper tantrum. And we, as adult agencies, cannot tolerate temper tantrums by any parties, particularly officers, unions, or benevolent societies, because they simply do not like the law. So I am very pleased to be part of this body and standing up for the rule of law and letting folks know that everyone will be treated fairly, but we need the process to operate. Otherwise, why have government?
Thank you, Esmeralda. Thank you, Ms. Simmons. Other board members?
Hi, Corrine Irish, mayoral appointee. I just wanted to add that having had family members who have passed away due to COVID, including a cousin of mine who was only 44 years old, this represents, for me, a very personal and direct threat to people that I care about. COVID is a real danger, and I think that we have to always be aware and keep in mind and not allow ourselves to relax as to how important it is to take the necessary precautions and not allow it to become political. We have to be careful and take precautions for the health of our staff as well as for the health of NYPD officers. So just the health threat can't be understated. And I know that there have been people on this panel who have been impacted, whose health has been impacted because of COVID. So it's just incredibly important that we do not relax and allow this to become a theoretical as opposed to a very real and direct threat to people's lives.
Thank you, Ms. Hodge. Thank you. Other board members before we go back to public comment? All right, so Yahira, will you announce our next person who wants to speak from the public?
Yeah, next we'll be hearing from Council Member Adrienne Adams.
Council member, welcome.
Thank you so much, and good morning again. To you, Chair Davey, I know this has been such a trying time. I wanted to be here this morning primarily to lend my support as a member of the Public Safety Committee, and just hearing Corrine Irish a minute ago really resonated with me as one who lost my father to COVID during this pandemic at the height of budget season. having to participate in numerous budget hearings, stated meetings, you name it. Seemed like 24/7. I participated. I really didn't skip a beat. And to know that that excuse is being used not to comply with the law, to me, is outrageous. The CCRB was created to be that balance between NYPD and the people. If we can't trust the process, then what do we trust? So I just wanted to make sure that I lent my voice this morning and at least showed up for this hearing, just to hear the statistics, just to hear the non-compliance by the unions, and just to echo what my colleague in the Assembly said. If there's no wrong, then the unions should want to bring their officers before this board happily so that they can be heard out, and that they can prove that whatever's been saying is just not true. We want to hear the facts. This board was developed so that the facts could be heard, and heard with full transparency, and just to know that it took public, it took all of this to be brought to public attention for there to finally be compliance, again, is the height of disrespect. So I just wanted this board to know that we appreciate your work. We appreciate your tenacity, the work that you do. We can get these meetings in remotely. We've been doing it for months, COVID or no COVID. They can be brought before you, and they can be brought and heard in full transparency. So I just wanted to say thank you, and let's get this done. It can be done.
Well, thank you, Council Member. Again, for your support. We're very appreciative. We're also appreciative for the support that we've received over time from the Public Safety Committee of the Council, and the Chair, Chair Donovan of that committee. So thank you all. And this agency depends on the City Council and its support. So we really appreciate your showing up today. Are there other public comments, Shahira?
Yes, next we will be hearing from Assemblymember Bishop.
Assemblymember, welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we cannot connect your webcam, it's saying. Okay. I don't know what's going on. All right, let me just try again. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. This is Assemblymember Radnice Bishard. I just wanted to first thank all of you, Chair Davey and CCRB, for having this emergency hearing on the failure of the NYPD members, doing what they need to do in terms of appearing before the board and addressing many of the complaints. I represent the Flatbush community, as well as I'm the head of the Brooklyn Democratic Party. So anything that's happened across Brooklyn is my issue as well. So again, I want to certainly thank all of you for putting this together. You know, I just want to mention that it's really important why we need the CCRB, and I know there's been conversation of making it more robust, because we just had situations over and over where complaints are going through, and for some reason a number of the complaints are not substantiated. CCRB should have some more, I would say, leverage and power in making some decisions that's inclusive to the community, and making some decisions that will impose some remediation. The tension from a long history of racial injustice in America has really opened our eyes most recently with occurrences from I Can't Breathe, Eric Garner, the murder of Breonna Taylor, most recently George Floyd. We as elected officials from the city and state have gathered to not only put police reform, but to certainly allow our budget to address how we can find ways to minimize the interaction between police officers and civilians, the very negative interactions between police officers and civilians that has certainly impacted our community, mostly minority communities, in a very negative way. Now, the system for evaluating these complaints, we know, is not working. Okay, having the fact that no cops have been interviewed by CCRB provost since the pandemic hit is an issue. I'm hearing that there's 1,100 complaints and more than 500 of the investigation that have been put on hold because police unions and officers are refusing to testify at remote hearings. Should not be an issue because now that we have virtual hearings, it should allow police officers to come before us for these hearings. We're not asking police officers to be at risk and to go out into physical hearing rooms. We're saying appear before us in your kitchen, in your living room. And then more than 750 complaints alleging abuses by the police during the protests alone have been filed. That's an issue. This is something that should be demanded in terms of having these hearings, and it should not be a choice. I would like to know, how long have the entire complaints have been pending? We have 750 complaints as a result of the protests. Okay, so we have about 400 complaints prior to that. How long were these other complaints prior to the protests were pending? What was the excuse before pandemic for these police officers not appearing? So, the unions contend that the online option doesn't let lawyers see their clients' body language, which can make it difficult to advise them. However, that has not stopped the state's court system from conducting arraignments and bail hearings. Even the U.S. Supreme Court is conducting hearings via teleconference. What is the issue? Attorney General Letitia James have even recommended that CCRB be expanded to address rising complaints in an independent and transparent way. She also said that the CCRB's jurisdiction should be explicitly expanded to include investigating allegations of bias, policing, and racial profiling. Now, we can talk about racial profiling because, again, it's a very fundamental issue that still yet has to be resolved on the state level. And when we don't have data, as I mentioned, when police officers are stopped questioning frisk or approaching a civilian, and we don't have forms and we don't have data to review the interactions between a police officer and a civilian, that becomes a problem in carrying this out in the court system. And the burden of proof would be on the actual civilian. So the excuse provided by NYPD union spokesperson is not the real reason the NYPD won't comply with the CCRB. The department simply does not want to face accountability, especially during this unprecedented time in our city. And these excuses must end today. I'm here to help deliver the accountability and justice. And whatever way I can be of use, please certainly use me. I have a working relationship with Commissioner Shea. I have a working relationship with de Blasio. And we can have conversations on how do we reform the way we conduct these hearings? How do we make it mandatory? Do we need to write legislation that will have a penal code attached to it so that these police officers, unions, are bound to making sure that they're responsible in coming before these hearings. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you so much. We're working diligently, and please call on me.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman, and we will. We appreciate your support of this process. I will just reiterate that as of yesterday, the department had, the NYPD has issued a order that these hearings are mandatory, and reminding the officers that they face suspension if they don't do them, both remote and in person. And so your vigilance with us over that process to make sure it moves forward effectively and expeditiously is very much appreciated and will be appreciated, so that we don't flag and they don't flag in the efforts to get these interviews done well and done expertly. So thank you, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you so much, and it's really great to hear that coming from you. And again, I'm here. I see my video is finally up. Whatever you need, please call on me. I'm here.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So Yahira, for our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember. I would like to acknowledge that Assemblymember Andrew Havesi has joined us. Not sure if he wants to send some greetings or leave a remark.
Hi, yes. So this is actually Alexa. I'm his chief of staff. I believe the assigned member is on the line, having dialed in and just had some computer issues, but we just want to thank everyone for putting this together, and thank you to the CCRB for having this crucially important meeting.
Well, thank you, and thanks to the Assembly member as well. And again, appreciate the support.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll be hearing from Jen Van Wong.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So first of all, I want to thank the board for holding this emergency meeting and the opportunity to comment on this important issue this morning. And I want to thank the board and the CCRB for your dedication to police accountability. The uprisings this past summer highlight the acute need for greater police accountability. The repeal of Police Secrecy Law 50A and the flood of complaints that have been filed in the CCRB in the aftermath of these protests confirms the widespread demand for it. And yet these reports about potential NYPD obstruction of CCRB investigations is troubling. But even more troubling is that their failure to cooperate is similarly met with little accountability and excess zero enforcement. If it had not been for the CCRB's vigilance, dedication, and persistence in negotiating the appearance of police officers for these investigations, would there be accountability? While NYPD's own patrol guide explicitly addresses the cooperation with CCRB investigations, it's typical for NYPD to flout their own guidelines in the patrol guide, and they regularly do so with impunity. So NYPD's willful obstruction of CCRB investigations is not just this discrete issue that's before the board today. Their resistance to meaningful oversight undermines the public trust in the department and in our city leadership. And so, again, while the CCRB has been able to reach a solution on this particular issue recently, flouting the rule of law is endemic within the NYPD. And so what is the solution? Does this mean that lawmakers have to go in and figure out new legislation? Will the CCRB recommend that it be empowered with contempt power and the ability to impose discipline? Should failure to cooperate in a CCRB investigation be considered an adverse inference relevant to the findings of substantiated complaints against members of service? Should disciplinary consequences for failure to cooperate be codified even further rather than being left in the patrol guide? And what role should corporation counsel play in instances of failure to cooperate? In other jurisdictions, there are stronger mechanisms when members of service fail to cooperate in an investigation by a civilian oversight committee. And in other jurisdictions and other oversight agencies like in DC, metropolitan police officers are not only required to show up by statute, but the statute also requires that the officer be disciplined for failure to appear. and remote hearings have been happening on a regular basis. The continued disregard that NYPD has for independent oversight and widespread disregard for the Odor Control Guide should alert members of the public and lawmakers of the need to strengthen the CCRB's oversight matters. Not only should the CCRB be granted unfettered access to the evidence that their investigators need to review these complaints, but the power to impose discipline should not solely rest with the police commissioner, who has already demonstrated that he has little appetite for meaningful accountability and true transparency. No other public service professional is able to so flagrantly flout meaningful oversight than NYPD officers. It's unacceptable that NYPD is allowed to obstruct CCRB investigations at every turn, and that NYPD retains the level of control that they do over the CCRB's ability to conduct investigations. Once again, I commend the work and advocacy that CCRB is engaging in to ensure that quality investigations are being done. I commend the CCRB for their vigilance and their persistence in ensuring that the NYPD officers are not able to flout the rule of law with impunity, but we must do more to hold them accountable. So thank you for this opportunity. Thank you again for your dedication and advocacy. I look forward to the work that CCRB is going to continue to do on this front.
Thanks. We appreciate your comments and particularly the supportive comments of the work that we've tried to do and your advocacy, and we will continue with your support and the support of others to move this process forward. So Yahira, can you call on our next speaker?
Yes, next we'll be hearing from Roger Clark.
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to also to share my outrage as to why the NYPD is refused. Could you?
Yes, we can hear
him.
We can. Hear. Please proceed.
Yes. Well, I also would like to share my outrage that the NYPD is refusing, even though they are required by law to actually participate and do everything they can to give you all the information so that y'all can make a determination if they're guilty or not guilty of committing any wrongdoing. This has been something that police officers has been doing not for years but decades. They have been able to use the law to their advantage to oppress minorities and simply to get away with impunity to do whatever they want. They're not only doing it to the CCRB, but recently we found out that they're also breaking the laws in other ways, like the Bronx defenders recently found out that that they have been using material, they have been using still information that the court, that the legislator back in the 70s specifically stated that police officers should not have access to information of sealed record. And if they have any type of information of somebody whose records was sealed, that they are supposed to return it either to the person who the sealed record belonged to, or they're supposed to destroy it. They could have never seen the type of digital things that they do. Now they have it at their fingerprint. The cell phone they have, all of the equipment that every officer have in New York State, they can look at any type of material, and that's outrageous. That's outrageous for them to do that. They even are able to use photos from sealed records to show to victims of crimes. And that's why now the Bronx offender took them to court with good reason. So we need to be able to rein in on all of these abuses from officers and stop them from causing harm to the community, because it's not right. If anybody in the community do anything, even remotely, the minute stuff, they are ready to fling the handcuffs on them, and they are ready to throw them into court, and sometimes even lie and say other stuff that didn't happen just to throw them under the jail. So it is really hypocritical that they don't want to cooperate. Now they are upset that the laws is not working again, that now the laws is going to be a little bit fairer. They should be able to, they want to know everything about the public, but when the public try to find anything about them, now they want to take us to court because of the 58 provision. So we need to be able to hold these guys accountable, and we expect that for the CCRB to hold them accountable and substantiate any wrongdoing that they do. Thank you.
And that's exactly that's exactly our mandate, and exactly what we will do. Is the accountability is key to this, and that's why we have this hearing this morning, to make sure that we continue to promote the fundamental principles of accountability and transparency in this process. And we thank you for your comments. Yahira, for our next speaker.
Thank you. Next, we'll be hearing from Daniel Boda. I just want to remind everyone to keep their comments to 2 minutes. And if you're calling in, you can use the *9 to raise your hand in case you want to make a comment during the public session. So Daniel Boda.
Hi, are you able to see me?
We can hear you. So let's proceed.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Chairman.
I think we may have lost you. Okay, let's go to our next speaker, and if he comes back, Yahira, we can reconnect him.
Okay, perfect. Next on the list, we have Andrew Case.
And remember, 2 minutes, please. Yes.
I will keep it to 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Please
Can you see? I can't see if I have video on or not. I want to thank you all for the hard work you've done to resolve this issue, and I think it's apparent that even though the negotiations went on for a long time, and I know you've all spoken how well the negotiations were handled from your side and apparently not from the PD side, what actually got them to make the decision to let officers come in was this meeting and the fact that there was going to be a slew of complaints substantiated against officers who didn't show up, and the fact that that was going to be in the press. And I think that it's a great lesson to the CCRB to use a little more force and a little more strength when making these decisions. And I think currently, you know, there are tons of body-worn camera footage that has not been released, that is not going to be released, and using the same strategy of telling the police department that you will take action against officers when they will not produce body-worn camera footage would be a great follow-up to this meeting. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yahira, next speaker.
Thank you. Next we have Josmar Trujillo.
Please go ahead, speaker. All right, Yahira, looks like that speaker is not there, so let's go to the next one.
Yeah, we're going to go back to Daniel.
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Mr. Trujillo.
All right. Thank you.
Please, and a reminder of 2 minutes.
Great. Just off the bat, I wasn't going to say this, but I've been coming to CCR meetings for years, and I think this practice of front-loading elected officials to speak at the beginning, it needs to be done away with. We're an hour into this meeting, and the New Yorkers who've taken out time to participate have had to listen to politicians grandstand for 60 minutes. Last time I checked, it wasn't the politicians in the streets who brought up the conversation that we're having now about accountability and about police unwilling to be part of a process that is legally mandated of them. About the NYPD, what happened the last couple of weeks is part of a history that goes back at least to the creation of this agency, when police officers were jumping on cars outside of City Hall like maniacs at just the idea of creating accountability. In 2014, 2015, when people were marching in the streets for at least Daniel Pantaleo to be held accountable, the unions, the NYPD, and the mayor's office delayed that for 5 years. 5 years of that one individual officer collecting taxpayer paychecks. So delays is nothing new. And it's not just the police unions. The police commissioner only yesterday decided that he would actually enforce the laws about them participating in CCRB interviews. So it's not just police unions. That's the low-hanging fruit is the NYPD and the police commissioner. The CCRB, as someone mentioned before, needs to take an active public voice in saying it needs independence and it needs the power to actually hold officers accountable. And that is a weakness that has been baked into this agency from the very beginning. And I challenge all of the board members to publicly ask that this agency not just fulfill its obligations under its mandate, but to actually have more power so that we can actually do the work that this agency was actually created to do. And that would be something that would be in line with the tone of the nation right now and going beyond what we've done in the past. And it would actually go towards dispelling the bad reputation that this agency has had of not being strong enough to actually do what it says it can do. Thank you.
Understood. And we will take your comments, various of them, various components of your comments on the advisement. So thank you. Yahaira, our next speaker.
We're going to go back to Daniel Boda, and after that we'll be hearing from Jonathan Logan.
Okay.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for coming back to me. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, Daniel, please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning to you, Chairman Davey, and members of the board. I want to thank you for calling this meeting today. I think it's very important to see the agency taking an assertive position when there's a crisis like this crisis that evolved around police refusing to come to their interviews. Just briefly, I want to let you know my name is Daniel Boda. I was a CCRB investigator from 2000 to 2007. I'm an attorney now, and I am in the criminal justice PhD program at John Jay, where I research police accountability. And I would like to echo the outrage that Mr. Trujillo just expressed, and that the elected officials and representatives who are on the call have also expressed. I just want to make two really brief comments. The first is that I would ask the board to consider amending its rules to provide specifically for remote interviews during emergencies. There have been situations, for instance, 9/11 when I was working at the agency, Superstorm Sandy, where the agency's offices have been shut down for a period of time, and I think an explicit rule would forestall any kind of similar obstructions on the part of the police unions in the future. Secondly, I would also like to raise up this issue of the ongoing reluctance of the NYPD to provide the CCRB with body-worn camera footage. It looks like in my research, I've found that complaints are more than three times as likely to be fully investigated when there's video footage. And the CCRB statistics show a great increase in substantiations, exonerations, a decrease in unsubstantiated cases. So video footage is absolutely crucial, and there's an ongoing crisis over the NYPD's refusal to provide rapid and transparent access to those videos to the CCRB. That's a crisis underneath this crisis. I hope that the elected officials who are on the call are aware of that and take to heart that there is still a critical situation at the CCRB over this issue that needs to be addressed, and that kind of reluctance of the PD needs to be overcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to say that we have now an agreement about access to body-worn camera footage. I still continue to believe that direct and unfettered access for investigators would be the best way to proceed, but we've come up with an approach now that we've all agreed to, and we're going to pursue that with vigor. And as well as this the agreement on remote interviews. But we all have to be vigilant, and we know that. Otherwise, it is the sort of nature of things to resort to their former status, and we can't afford to do things as we used to do them, both on body-worn camera footage access and on these remote interviews. We've just got to stay persistent and vigilant. And again, I thank the staff at CCRB for negotiating both of these agreements. and now it's our job to make sure that they go forward. And again, we're going to need the support of everybody in the city, from the commissioner to the mayor to Corp Council to everyone, to ensure that these processes proceed the way they are intended to and are directed to by law and regulation. So thanks for those comments. Yahira, the next speaker, please.
Before we move on to Jonathan Logan, I just wanted to pass it over to Board Member Bond, or she.
Sure.
Thank you, Yahira. Good morning, Chair Davey, and all that have joined us this morning. As I mentioned to you earlier, unfortunately, I have to actually step off the call in order to deal with childcare responsibilities, which is something I think a lot of New Yorkers can empathize with these days. But before I go, I really just wanted to thank you, Chair Davey, and John Darsh, the rest of the leadership team at CCRB, for all the work that you've done to help come to a resolution on this issue. I also am in complete agreement with all of the comments from the other board members that were made today, and thank them also for all of their hard work in ensuring that we can actually provide the kind of meaningful civilian oversight that we are tasked with providing. And one sort of final comment, I really just want to thank the staff publicly. This has been a really hard few months, and I think we've acknowledged the leadership, but we've got lots of folks who are working day in and day out in difficult circumstances, who I'm sure have been frustrated over the last few months by the lack of participation on the part of members of service, and have continued to do their jobs with diligence and continue to conduct investigations while working from home, while trying to keep their families safe, and while continuing to serve the city of New York. So I really do want to thank the entire staff of the CCRB for all the work that they've done. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Erica. We appreciate your leadership as well. And the public should know that the board members engage behind the scenes when the cameras are not on or we're not at a board meeting. And we all take seriously the responsibility that we've been given. And so the contributions that get made in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of having to care for family and others by the members of this board is also really appreciated, and particularly so when we are charged now with moving a process forward where there's been a lot of resistance to its progress. So I appreciate your being there, and particularly for me and others. So thank you. Yahira, to public comment.
Yes. We're going to go back to Jonathan Logan. After that, John Sonda. And if anybody wants to leave a comment, please use the raise the hand function.
Mr. Logan.
Yeah, hello, good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so frequently I don't praise NYPD executives or officials, but I'd like to acknowledge Chris Monahan, the president of the CEA union, who by way of a letter he wrote to the PC, he wrote to the mayor and explicitly called for the change of police culture. In that letter, he highlights how he believes, and I quote, he highlights how CompStat to be the primary driving force that is undermining police and community relations in New York City. In that letter he wrote to the police commissioner and to the mayor, he goes on to state that the fact is, notwithstanding the repeal of stop and frisk, CompStat puts pressure on precinct and division commanders to go into minority neighborhoods for targeted enforcement, in quotations, precision policing, by way of arrest and summonses. This inherently creates tension between black and brown communities and the police because their subordinate officers are expected to produce activity, which we all know is dog whistle for quotas. And these are all quotes, by the way. So further going to his letter, he states, CompStat has always been used as a means of embarrassing and coercing commanders into more proactive policing, which has a direct consequence to community police relations with disparate impact on minority communities. Okay, here's the thing that I like to really get at. As other elected officials have previously stated, okay, and there's a common thread here, we have to break down.
I think we lost Mr. Logan. So Yahira, let's go to the next speaker. While that speaker's coming, I'll just say I think the reform that we continue to need in policing has to come both from the inside out and the outside in. And so all efforts at improving police-community relationships are appreciated and expected when they emerge from within the department itself. So our next speaker, you're hired.
Next, we have John Sonda, and that will conclude our public session.
Great.
Hi. On May 14, 2017, Executive Director Jonathan Darsh emailed me. I just wanted to let you know that I found the reopening request that Chris Benito sent me on 1/27/17. I denied the reconsideration request on this same date. I will be reviewing the request again this week. On October 16, 2017, he subsequently emailed me. I assigned Dane Buchanan to review your complaint and determine whether or not there were any FADO allegations in the complaint. He determined that the complaint possessed allegations within the CCRB's jurisdiction. As a result, I instructed Mr. Buchanan to reopen that complaint and to handle it himself. But according to the CCRB charter, under the section reconsideration or reopening of cases, upon receipt of a written request to reopen a case from a complainant, alleged victim, or subject police officer, a panel, chair, or executive director may reopen any case previously closed without a full investigation. Now, Dane Buchanan is not any of those. And so basically, Executive Director Jonathan Darsh's actions violated the CCRB charter by assigning an employee of the CCRB to conduct the business of a panel, a chair of the board, or the executive director. Now, at the last board meeting, I asked the chairperson if somebody has evidence that the executive director violated the CCRB charter, who should that person supply that evidence to? And Mr. Davey did not say that I should provide, or somebody should provide that evidence to the person that has the hiring and firing responsibilities of the executive director. Is that still the case?
So if you will email me your complaint, I will respond and refer it to the appropriate agency.
Is there a reason why you did not want the evidence last month?
I think we instructed you how to provide that evidence.
Yes. Do you have hiring and firing authority of the executive director?
Mr. Sonda, I'm not going to discuss personnel matters with you in the public like this. If
that's just
information.
That's a general question. Who has hiring?
Soren, will you mute the mic of the speaker so that we can proceed with the meeting, please? Thank you. I want to thank all of you who've come out this morning to be a part of this meeting, for your advocacy and support of accountability and transparency in policing in New York, for your support of the effort to get the officers and the unions to comply with what the law mandates for this agency, and that is the ability to interview officers in the course of the investigations, which is fundamental to these investigations. I want to thank the staff again for its hard work, and the leadership, particularly John Darsh and Matt Kadushin and Jericho Richardson for their leadership. And I know the late nights of phone calls and the early morning of phone calls, and I know the conversations, as Mr. Siegel has noted, that John Darsh and others have had with all the parties involved in trying to resolve this issue. It is unfortunate that we even got here, but it looks like we've taken the step we need to take. I'm going to suggest that this not become a pattern, that the ability to of the CCRB to do its job not be thwarted in the ways that that have been attempted so far. It is not fair to the people of New York City. It reflects poorly on the part of those who engage in such efforts to thwart the work of this agency, and it simply needs to stop. And we need all the leadership of the city to step up and support this agency, not out of the side of their mouths, not under their breaths, not behind the scenes, but publicly support this agency and acknowledge the work that it has done, acknowledge the work that the staff does, and continue to provide the agency with the resources and the support it needs to do its job. The law demands no less, and the people of the city of New York deserve no less. So I'll entertain a motion now that we adjourn to executive session. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
It's been made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? No. The ayes have it. We are adjourned to executive session.